أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat as condolences to the Imam of our time, Sahibul Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli Muhammad. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم من مصابنا لأهل البيت عليهم السلام. May Allah reward us for our commemoration of the difficulties of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. The last few nights we've been talking about learning from the example of this personality of Sayyidah Zahra. And one of the ayat that we mentioned in light of this relationship that we want to have with Bibi Fatima is on the basis of the statement of where Allah commanded that say to the people, O Rasulullah, that I don't want any reward for you for bringing you the risalat, except that you have mawadda for my near ones. And you have love for my family. And unanimously we agree that within the family of Rasulullah, no matter how you look at it, his daughter Fatima is included. The conversation around the term mawadda and why Allah selected this term and what that encompasses and what kind of love that is a very lengthy conversation. But one thing that's very straightforward is no matter what this term mawadda means, when we talk about love, there's a few different ways that love is reflected. Sometimes love is reflected by when we think of somebody, we think nice things about them. Sometimes when we think about love for somebody, we think about how my heart feels when I hear their name, right? You hear the name of your beloved and your heart suddenly goes thump, 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 thump. But the most encompassing way, the most true form of love we say is that when I love somebody, I want to be like them, or I want to be someone who they are happy with. I want my actions to reflect my love. Right? When I want someone to say that I love you, you should be able to see it in my actions, right? When we say to our parents, we love our parents, what do we try to do? We try to behave in a fashion that our parents would be happy with us. Why? Because we love them. In the same way, when it comes to Ahlul Bayt, it's not sufficient that we just say, I love the Ahlul Bayt. The true love of the Ahlul Bayt needs to be reflected in our actions. Let me give you an example very briefly. One of the ulama of Najaf, he says, I went to Sham and I spent some time there. And what I found was that in the city of Sham, he says, this is a khususiyah, this is something special I saw in them. I didn't see it in other places, not to say that only they did it. He says, I saw that the women, when they would call their husband, they would say, Yabna Ammi, Yabna Ammi. Yabna Ammi literally translates, oh son of my uncle. And they would call their husbands, Yabna Ammi. And the husbands would reply, yes, what's the problem? This alim says, he says, what I did was I asked the local, I said, is it common that women marry their cousins? Is that why everybody says, Yabna Ammi? And he says, no, actually that's not the case. When a lady calls her husband and she calls her husband Yabna Ammi, she's not calling him Yabna Ammi specifically because that's her cousin. She's calling him Yabna Ammi because they remember Sayyidah Zahra salamullahi alayha used to call Ali ibn Abi Talib Yabna Ammi. So they showed their love for Sayyidah Zahra by saying Sayyidah Zahra used to address her husband not by his name, not by anything else. She would call him, "Oh, son of my uncle." So they said, we call our husband son of my uncle, Yabna Ammi, out of love of Sayyidah Zahra. That they loved Sayyidah Zahra so much that they took one characteristic from her and they made it their own. The same way when you and I say we want to love Sayyidah Zahra, we want to look at her life for lessons and see what are the lessons that we apply in our life. Now over the past 2 nights, the first night we discussed about the fada'il of this personality, how great this personality is. Yesterday our conversation was around the idea that if you want to be successful in life, that if we said wealth and materialism is success in life, that Sayyidah Zahra would be someone who is not successful. Another way of determining how someone is successful is you back into it. Once I've decided this personality is successful, rather than saying, okay, to be successful I need to have these characteristics, I say, no, this is a successful personality. Let me look at their life and take examples from them so that I become like them. I don't need to know the formula itself. I just need to know a good example of someone who's successful. And I can follow that example. And that's the point of today's conversation is we want to take a look at the life of this personality, the life of Sayyidah Zahra, and take a look and see how do we adapt some of her characteristics to our life. One, so that when we say we love Sayyidah Zahra, it shows in our character, in our manners, in our behavior. Two, when we say that this personality was successful, let me take lessons from her then. Let me understand what she was trying to teach me so that if she is successful, and let me explain to you, the success of Sayyidah Zahra is not like anything else you can understand. Shall I give you an example? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You've heard of the Day of Judgment, right? Day of Judgment, long, difficult, painful. Our Holy Prophet is something unique and special on the Day of Judgment. In one of the narrations describing the status of Rasulullah, Allah says, and He explains that the heat on the Day of Judgment will be so oppressive that you will stand on this Day of Judgment for 50,000 years for your questioning, and the heat on that day, there will be no shade, no comfort, no support. He says that on that day I will make this earth so uncomfortable. The Anbiya, the prophets of Allah, the chosen people of Allah will call out, Ya Allah, nafsi, nafsi. Oh Allah, protect me from the heat of this day. With the exception of one personality who will call out, Ya Allah, ummati, ummati. That one personality who will be more concerned than his own self, will be concerned about, oh Allah, protect my nation from this heat, will be our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So lofty is the status of Rasulullah on the Day of Judgment that Allah says, oh my Habib, my beloved. No one in the history of humanity has Allah called my beloved except this Prophet. He says, Ya Habib, oh my Habib, you will be the first to enter into heaven. There will be no one who precedes you into the entry of heaven. But look at the status of Sayyidah Zahra, that Rasulullah says, Fatima, my daughter, I want her to enter heaven even before I do. That is a successful personality that the most beloved creation of Allah says, this my daughter will be the one who precedes even me into entering into heaven. So we want to look at this personality, that if this is someone who is so beloved to our Prophet, if this is someone who is so beloved to Allah, what can we learn from her and apply to our lives? And to that, we want to take a look at 3 phases of her life and see what are the lessons to apply. Now sometimes the lesson is, pray more, fast more, cry when you pray, cry when you fast. You know, they're good things, very good things. Read Quran more. But then there are other aspects that interact with our day-to-day life. We want to look at the life of this personality and see what are the applications that we have in our day-to-day interactions or in our relationships that we can take from her and apply to our life. Which is why we want to take a look at her position as one, The daughter of Rasulullah, and what we take from her from that role as a daughter. That what is the aspect of being a daughter and a father, or even in general, a child and a parent? And how do we apply the lessons of her life to our life? 2, her role as a wife. That what are the lessons that we take from the personality of Sayyidah Zahra to apply, that when we are married, what our marriage should be like and what our future should be like. And 3rd, we take a look at her role as a mother, as a parent. What are the lessons that we apply to our life in our role as a parent that we can take from the personality of Sayyidah Zahra? So we'll begin our discussion by mentioning this first position. If you give me one very loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When we look at, for example, the relationship between a father and a daughter, let's forget father and child, let's look at father and daughter. The general consensus of how we want to treat our daughters is that the daughter is the princess in the eyes of her father. That a father's desire is that he should take care of everything his daughter wants, and she should never want for anything, and she should have a very happy life, because the pleasure of that daughter is the pleasure of the father. Now boys, don't feel bad. It's the same for you too. Your parents love you just as much, but you're not girls. That relationship is what traditionally we understand is that a successful relationship that we take a look at in our society is a father is successful as a father if his child wants for nothing. I give them everything, I make them happy, I give them satisfaction and peace that the world doesn't have to disturb them and bother them. I've created a perfect bubble around them. And we see this as success as a parent. My child should have to go through no difficulty. And this is true, that this is the desire that society teaches us, that when you have children, you should try to make them comfortable in every aspect. And there's a problem with this. The problem with this is that as long as your child is under your roof, they don't know the cost of anything. They don't have to think about the consequences of the choices that they make. They have a comfortable life. And then one day, all of a sudden, you push them out and you say, go beta, go beti, go out into the world. And they go out into the world and they have no idea how to interact with society. That this life of peace and heaven that they've had with their parents, all of a sudden, one day, they step out into reality, and it went from heaven to being a piece of hell. Because they don't know how to interact with society. They don't know how to prioritize their life and their goals and their finances and their needs and the etiquette of dealing with other people and making complicated decisions. Why? Because they never had to make a decision or deal with the issues of life when they lived with their parents. So what winds up happening, especially in the case of a daughter many times, is that she stays in the house of her father and she is happy. Life is perfect. Everything is good. No problems, no worries. Everything is taken care of. She's provided for. No issues. And then all of a sudden she gets married. And she goes to the house of her husband, and the husband says, tomorrow morning I want breakfast. And she says, I've never cooked an egg in my life. What am I supposed to do breakfast for you? Or she goes to the house of her husband and the husband says, now I need you to help me manage the affairs and the finances of the household. And she says, okay, what does that mean? Or I need your support in helping with my family and dealing with my in-laws. And she says, well, I don't like them. I don't want to deal with them. And she's never had the problem of dealing with individuals that she's not comfortable working with. What we do is we take our children according to this Western or modern concept of success in raising a child, and we raise an infant who is an infant until the day that they leave our house, and then all of a sudden they're thrown into adulthood. But now let's take a look at the example of how our Holy Prophet wanted us to raise children. And we have an example of how he raised his daughter. And while the desire is for a father that he raises his child and his children to have a perfectly peaceful life, a happy life, no complications, that's not how Rasulullah raised his daughter. The relationship that Rasulullah had with Sayyidah Zahra was much bigger than simply a relationship of pleasure and happiness. It was a relationship where Rasulullah established this relationship between parent and child as musharaka, as a partnership. He included his daughter in the process of living life to prepare her for the world after that, for after she leaves her father's house. He trained his daughter in dealing with complex issues of life and managing the household and the affairs of the environment, so that when tomorrow she goes independently out into her own house, she's a personality who is capable of performing many great things. She has an opinion that's valid and should be respected. She has an opinion that is weighted against experience and trials of life. He put out a complete personality in the example of Sayyidah Fatima az-Zahra salamullahi alayha. How? Let's look at how. And I know this speaks more to the parents than to the children, but it's important that you understand that when your parents are in society, they're in life, don't just assume it's my parents' problem, I don't need to ask them. When you see your parents going through difficulty or being upset, don't just assume it's not my problem, it's their problem, let them figure it out. Sit with them and be a support to them. You don't have to ask them what's wrong. If they want to discuss with you, they will. But don't ignore the idea that today my father's mood is different than it was yesterday. Today my father is not happy, so let me just stay in my room and play with my video games. Be a support for your parents the way Sayyidah Zahra was for her father. Look at the example. We know that Rasulullah said, the last person I see when I leave the city is Fatima. The first person that I see when I come back from a journey is Fatima. Let me ask you something. Were all of the journeys of Rasulullah peaceful and happy? Did he always come back safe and unharmed? There were times when Rasulullah left for war. Did he hide that from his daughter? When he came back from his journey, he was injured. Did he hide that from his daughter? When he would go out and do tabligh to the people and they would be harsh with him, did he hide that from his daughter? No, he included her in this process to train her that tomorrow when life is difficult, when there are challenges, when reality comes and there are difficulties in life, oh my daughter, you have been trained by me in how to handle these difficulties in your own life. Such is the example that we want to apply to our lives as well too. That we want someone in our children that when we go through difficulty, rather than 20 years from now, my child has to learn all over again from scratch how to deal with this. I include them with me in this process. Which is why we take a look and we see Sayyidah Zahra was something unique, that she was given the title Abiha. The title Abiha translates literally mother, Abiha, of her father. Meaning that Sayyidah Zahra loved and was involved in taking care of and the support of her father on a day-to-day basis so much that Rasulullah said, this daughter of mine is as if she was my mother. And that's the idea that we want to take. When it comes to our children, yes, we want to give them happiness and pleasure and comfort in life. But not at the expense that they're ill-prepared and untrained and they have to go through the same difficulties in life that we went through. Success in our children is that we give them the inheritance that if I went through a difficulty, that my child doesn't have to repeat the same problem or mistake and difficulty. That my child is someone who benefits from that, so that tomorrow when they go into society and they become a part of this community, when tomorrow my child grows up and he enters into this society as a mature man or a mature woman, or tomorrow he moves to another state where the Mu'min family is not as well established. Here, mashallah. Say they move to California, Texas. At that time, will my child, when he enters into a community, will he be somebody who's respected? Will he be somebody who has an opinion on how to help the community? Will he be someone who is respected and is respected as someone who can help fix problems, or he creates problems? Tomorrow, if my child has a difficult relationship with a relative, did I train him how to deal with those difficult relationships? Did I train him how to behave when it comes with people that he doesn't like? Or did I protect him from all of these things so that he's unprepared for it? When we look at the example of Sayyidah Zahra, it's very practical. If I want my child to grow up like Sayyidah Zahra, I have to raise her in my house like Sayyidah Zahra was raised. I can't expect for my daughters to be like Zahra and my sons to be like Ali if in my house I didn't train them the way Zahra and Ali were trained. This is why Look at the practical relationship that's coming to us and the lesson that if I love Sayyidah Zahra, let me raise my daughters like Sayyidah Zahra was raised. Let me create an environment in my house that prepares my children that when they enter into society, they are practical members of society. They are influential members of society, not because of wealth or status or family name, but because of their personality and having the capability to do good in society. Next, we take a look at the role of Sayyidah Zahra as a wife. But one loud salawat first. The next salawat, if it sounds like this, I think I'm putting you to sleep. We'll finish the conversation. Salawat ala Again, the point that we're having here is we're discussing what is the contemporary opinion, what is the social opinion of society we live in, compared with the lesson of what Islam wants us to have. When we look at the position and the situation of marriage in society, how do we measure a successful marriage? How do we measure a good marriage? And there are two very simple structures to this that are generally the common accepted, that you measure happiness in one of two ways. Either you measure happiness in marriage by seeing through my marriage what greater items did I attain in life. Meaning that now that I'm married, has my fiscal liquidity increased? Can I do more now? Can I have a bigger house? Can I have a bigger car because I'm married? Is my success considered something in the process that now that I have more money, I'm successful? Now that I have more respect in society, I'm successful. The other idea of how to manage or measure success in a marriage that's typically accepted is how happy can I keep my spouse? If my spouse is happy, that means I'm successful. To the extent where there's the famous saying, right? Happy wife, happy life. That if I can keep my spouse happy and satisfied, that means I'm successful in marriage. I've done something good with marriage. This measure is even applied today in society. When we look for a spouse, for example, we look for a spouse that, for example, is either wealthy, has a good education, how much money they earn, what do they drive. How do we measure this idea of who we should marry in contemporary society? We look at a number of how handsome are they, how pretty are they, what family they come from, how much money they have, what education they have. All of these aspects of materialism. Why? Because when I look at my happiness in marriage, I'm judging that I want to be happy in marriage by either how much I have or how much this person can give me. But in Islam, success in a marriage is not measured through material means. Right? We talked about this yesterday. Physical, spiritual, right? Remember, everybody? Success in a marriage is measured by the idea that through my marriage, am I more successful at completing my purpose in life? Whatever my goal that I chose to achieve with this life, by being married, does it make me closer to achieving my goal? If, for example, my goal was to be famous, my marriage should be something where my spouse, by their benefit and their support, I go further down the path of my life of being famous. If my goal was to be wealthy, that my spouse joins with me and they make me go further down my goal of becoming rich. Which is why if my goal in life is to be a good Muslim, a good mu'min, a good person who has faith in Allah and gets to heaven, my purpose is to get to heaven. My wife or my husband should be someone who helps me get to my goal in life, going to heaven. If I have a successful marriage, that means that by the help of this person, I am now getting closer to my goal of achieving this goal. Which is why we have the narrations and the ahadith that tell us that one who gets married has protected or completed half of his faith. Because now jointly together, the two of us, both of us, if our goal is heaven, now we're both going to work together and my effort is going to be reduced because my spouse is helping me get to heaven. So when we look for a spouse, and if you're already married, wait, we'll talk about that too. But if you're looking for a spouse, and if you already are married, please don't be looking for a spouse. I look for a spouse, I discuss with that person that I want to marry, what's your purpose? What's your goal in life? What do you want to achieve? If, for example, my goal is that I want to be a doctor. And my wife's goal is that she wants to play basketball. She's going to spend her energies going to train and play basketball, and I'm going to spend my energies running in a different direction to go be a doctor. The two of us are going to have a hard time coming together on one goal to drive towards. So what we do is, before we get married, take a look at all those other things, but that's not important. The important part is that that person shares your purpose and your goal in life. Now, in the case if you're already married, how do we do this? What we do is we unify our goal by discussing and talking to each other. We increase our conversations with each other about what do we want to achieve? Who do we want to become? And what that does is it forces you to be honest with yourself of who you are as a person, and make sure that your partner isn't making assumptions. You're working for the same goal. You have the same ideal at the end of the day. That open communication starts to align the process of coming to the same goal. It may be that when you got married, you had two different directions. But by living together, having love for one another, when we start sharing and talking about who do I want to be? Who do I want to be is not only a question that you ask yourself as a child, it's a question you ask yourself every day. It's a question you ask yourself, if I leave today, who am I? How do I want that image of me to change? Who do I want to be as I go on in life? By having that conversation with our spouse, we start to unify this process of having the same goal in life. Now, before I go on to teach you the example of Sayyidah Zahra and how her marriage reflected this, let me talk to you about a point that I heard in a piece of poetry, which talks about the fact that the iman, the faith of Amir al-Mu'mineen was completed by his marriage to Sayyidah Zahra. Now, we know that for a normal person, when we get married, our faith is completed, or half of our faith is completed by our spouse. But let me ask you something. Someone who's one strike on the day of Khandak, when Amir al-Mu'mineen went out into the battlefield, our Holy Prophet said, today the strike of Ali is weightier than all of the Ibadat from now until the end of this world. A person like that, is there any loss in his marriage that needs to be completed? Is there any loss in his faith that needs someone else to complete it? Let me give you another example. There's a famous statement of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, the sun has never shined on a more truthful person than Abu Dhar. The sun has never shined on a person more truthful than Abu Dhar. So one of these companions, we'll call them, companions, he decided to be a little mischievous. He decided to be a little funny. He says, Ya Rasulullah, then what about Ali? Is Abu Dhar more truthful than Ali? Look at the reply of Rasulullah. He says, you fool, there is no comparison between any human being and Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. That don't ever imagine that Ali is like a normal person, that you can compare him with someone, or that his level is comparable with any human being. When we talk about Abu Dhar, we talk about Abu Dhar amongst people. When we talk about Ali, there is no one that you could ever bring that would align with Ali ibn Abi Talib. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The point of this statement is that you and I are people. For us, our iman is completed when we get married. When it comes to personalities like Sayyidah Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen, there is never a doubt about the completion. There is never a loss in their example of faith. Which is why Imam Ali said the statement. He said, had Allah removed all of the curtains from in front of my eyes, had there been nothing hidden from me in the creation of Allah, my iman in Allah would not have changed the weight of an eyelash. So this idea that marriage is something that completes the faith of a person is for you and me, not for people like Amir al-Mu'mineen. So what is the marriage? What are the lessons from marriage that we learn from the example of the marriage of Sayyidah Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen? The first example that we take a look at that shows us is the priority of marriage between Imam Ali and Sayyidah Zahra was not a priority of wealth. That wealth and material use was something that was a tool to be used to receive and reach the goal of their lives. How do we see this? At the time of the marriage of Bibi Fatima, her father is the leader of the nation that stretches almost from the borders of Yemen to Sham. He's created a government in a location that no one could conquer before. Remember, Arabia as a location had the Persian Empire to one side and the Roman Empire to the other side. Not the Romans could conquer Arabia, nor the Persians could conquer Arabia. Yet here came this one individual who was the Prophet of Allah and conquered this entire region in less than 10 years. Our Prophet was someone who had wealth and means should he have chosen to use it. But when his daughter gets married, his only daughter gets married, what does he give his daughter in marriage? Her mahar is 500 dirhams or less than that. The objects in her house that he gives her are the most basic objects that the most basic individual would have in their house. To the extent where the narrations say that they did not even have, for example, a case or a chest to put their clothes in. That Amir al-Mu'mineen took 2 branches of a tree and he tied them together to put a place where they would hang their clothes that they weren't using. So basic was their lifestyle. Why? Because their goal in life was not wealth. Their goal in life was that through this marriage we should attain proximity to Allah. 2, we see the concept of a partnership between husband and wife. At the time of after the marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zahra, there's a narration that says that these 2 personalities went to Rasulullah and they said, Ya Rasulullah, how shall we divide the responsibilities of the household? And Rasulullah replied, Ali, you take care of the matters outside of the house, and Fatima, you take care of the matters inside the house. That system of partnership was to show that just because the 2 are married, it's not simply the wife's responsibility to take care of everything. And it can go the other way, that it's not simply the man's responsibility to take care of everything. Rather, there's a partnership between the 2 of them, that the both of these personalities work together. That they work together to run the household. That the affairs inside of the house were the responsibility of Sayyidah Zahra. Bringing the groceries, bringing the water, bringing these effects was the responsibility of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the 2 worked together to manage this household and to make it a successful household that they work together. The same way, if we apply the lesson in our life, is that in my marriage with my spouse, it should be a partnership. I take some of the responsibility and the obligations to make this a successful marriage, to run the affairs of the house, and my wife takes some of those obligations. Sometimes I do nice things for her that alleviate her responsibilities as a partner to assist in her day, and sometimes she takes some responsibility to help me out. We work together in this process. The next area that we see when we look at the idea of marriage and what are the lessons that apply to married life is to have mutual respect for one another, is to have consideration for one another. Sometimes it happens when you get married, the person who knows the worst of you is your spouse, not the best of you. The best of me is for outside when I go into society. When I come home, I don't need to show up and be kind or be caring. No, she's stuck with me, she's not going anywhere. Or he's stuck with me, he's not going anywhere. We're stuck with each other, so who cares? But look at the example of mutual respect between these 2 individuals. Where there's one narration where Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he comes home, he says, Oh Fatima, is there anything in the house to eat? And Sayyidah replies, Oh Abu al-Hasan, there has been no food in the house for 2 days. Had there been any food that I had saved for Hassanain, I would have given it to you as a preference. And Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, Fatima, 2 days without food. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you bring it to my attention that there was no food in the house? She replies, Oh Abu al-Hasan, I saw you in a state of difficulty. I saw you in a state of worry. I saw that the people had been bothering you very much, and I did not want to add to your burden and your responsibility, so I sat silently. The that the idea of that respect and that consideration for each other, that look how far Sayyidah Zahra goes for Amir al-Mu'mineen. And look at how upset Amir al-Mu'mineen is. Why did you wait? Why didn't you tell me? I would have been happy to. He was not upset. Huh? You didn't speak for 2 days. What's wrong with you? She didn't say, can't you see there's nothing in the house? That concept of respect and love for one another, we also see at the time of the passing of Sayyidah Zahra, where she says, "Oh Ali, have you ever found me to be disobedient to you? Have you ever found me not to listen to what you have asked me to do? Is there any point that you were upset with me for my actions and my behavior?" Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, "Hasha lillah, heaven forbid for that to be possible. Oh Zahra, there was never anyone as a spouse who was kinder than you." To where Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "I never once raised my voice at Zahra. I never once forced her to do something she didn't want to. I never treated her with any disrespect as long as she was with me." You see, our obligation to our spouse in having a successful marriage, how can we ask Allah for His mercy? How can we ask Allah for His rahmah when the person who is attached to me and is the one who is most associated with my affairs, if I don't show them respect and love, if I don't show them mercy, how will I receive the mercy of Allah? Which is why, if you want to understand practical aspects of having in your marriage, is to have respect and mercy for your spouse. Be conscientious of these affairs. Finally, if you're still with me, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The role of Sayyidah Zahra as a mother, or the role as a parent. The role that we have as a parent and the relationship between a parent and child is a very gentle and delicate subject that we always want to do the best by our children, and we want to talk about what is the kind of environment, how do we raise our children well? What do we do to make our children pious? What do we do to make our children good people? And the lessons from the house of Sayyidah Zahra are things that we can apply to our day-to-day life to create that environment. The same way, we want our daughters to be like Zahra, we have to raise them the way Rasulullah did. We want our sons to be like Husain, we have to raise them the way Sayyidah Zahra raised them. In this we take a look at first and foremost the idea of what is the environment that's created in the household. That we want to create an environment in the household that when I tell my child, for example, to read Quran, I tell my child to pray, I tell my child to do all of these mustahabbat and ibadat. If I'm not doing those actions, my child isn't going to do those actions. I want my child to be hafiz of Quran. If I don't read Quran, what's going to make me think my child will become a hafiz of Quran? If I don't create the environment in my house to show love and respect of Ahlul Bayt and the Quran, how will my children develop that? Look at the example. Imam Hassan ibn Ali al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. He says, I would see when I went to sleep that my mother would stand in her niche to pray. And when I would wake up, I would find her still praying to the extent that her feet would be swollen from standing in prayer all night. How amazing is it for a child that when he spends time with his parents, he sees them in worship. When he is associated with his parents, he sees them doing good things. Let's take a look very simply today, right? All these iPads and tablets. We want our children, now you can listen to lessons of Quran, you can listen to good stories, you can read good books. We want our children to do all of these mustahab, mashallah things with our iPads and our tablets. But let me ask you something. If my child sees me playing Angry Birds on my phone, what is my child going to do with that tablet? He's going to play Angry Birds. If my child sees me watching fuzul videos of just random things on my phone, what is my child going to do with it? He's going to do the same thing. When I create the environment, when I set the example of what I use my device for, my phone for, my tablet for, my child will mirror that example. Which is why Imam Hassan says, I never saw anyone who worshipped Allah more than my mother Fatima Zahra. Salawat ala Muhammad. And what kind of worship? He says, I would listen to my mother as she was reciting her dua and she was supplicating to Allah. She supplicated the entire night until the morning came. Yet once I did not see her ask for anything for herself. All night she did dua. Me, I pray for 5 minutes at night. The first person I ask for is me. He says, all night my mother prayed. She didn't ask for herself. I asked her in the morning, Ya Amma, why did you pray for everyone but you didn't pray for yourself? You spent the entire night in worship, but you never asked anything for yourself. And she replies, oh my son Hassan, Ajjar thumma ad-dar. That first when you ask for your neighbors, for your community, your friends, the people around you, before you can ask for yourself. That this is the environment that we want to create in our households. If I want my children to respect Salah, I have to pray. If I want my children to recite Quran, I have to recite Quran. If I want my children to do good things, the same way Sayyidah Zahra set the example in her house. The second point that we take a look at is the idea of creating an environment of learning, which is attached to this subject. That the example comes that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when wahi would come to Rasulullah, he would listen to the wahi, and when he would get home to tell Sayyidah Zahra what was the revelation, Sayyidah Zahra would say, yes, I know. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, huh? I just heard it in the masjid. How do you already know what came? She didn't say anything. What was happening was that when wahi would come down to Rasulullah, Imam Hassan as a child would sit and listen. As soon as the wahi was completed, he would run home and repeat it to his mother. So by the time Imam Ali came home from the masjid, she had already heard it from Imam Hassan. But Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't know this until one day he says, I came home. And when I came home and I stood outside of the door, I heard my son Hassan repeating the ayat of Quran to his mother. And as soon as I stood outside of the door and my shadow fell under the door, Hassan stopped repeating the wahi to his mother. So Sayyidah Zahra, what does she do? She say, huh? Why did you stop? Ta. Why did you stop? Did she do this? No. She says, oh my son Hassan, every time you repeat the wahi to me perfectly, why did you stop? Continue, my son. Continue the recitation of wahi. Shabash, keep going. How do we do it? Our child, we tell him to remember a lesson, he doesn't remember. The first mistake he makes, what? Yeah. Dhyan nahi dete ho, padhte nahi ho. You don't listen, you don't pay attention. What's wrong with you? Look at the example of positive reinforcement in education that the mother is giving her child. She's giving him positive reinforcement. She's saying, my son, continue. You're so good at remembering. Every time you remember perfectly, what happened? Why did you stop? Continue, continue. I want to listen. She's focused on the lesson of her child. She's focused on listening to what he's learned. She's giving him importance. And Imam Hassan replies, he says, I did not stop except for embarrassment because of my father who is standing outside of the door. That environment of education and teaching our children is something that has to be reflected and improved upon with positive reinforcement. When we want our children to succeed, we have to tell them and show them that faith is a priority. That faith is something significant. When they leave a majlis, for example, sit down with your child, have him repeat the majlis to you in the car. When you give him that responsibility that you know he's going to listen to you and he feels responsible that I will have to sit and repeat, the way he listens to the majlis will be different. The way you listen to the majlis will be different too, because now you got to quiz your son in the car. You got to quiz your daughter in the car. You change the responsibility and you reward them for that. That did you pay attention? What did you learn? You make it a conversation, a positive environment. When it comes to things like our Saturday schools and our Sunday schools, make it a priority. Teach them that the biggest responsibility that you have on Saturday or Sunday is to be in the madrasa. Nothing takes priority over this. This way they'll learn that Islam is important. If you teach them that sports are more important than Islam, if you teach them that going out is more important than Islam, if you teach them that we had a late night last night, let's not go to school today, do you think that child's going to think Islam is important in his life? Is that going to be something significant in his life? Or is it going to be something that, when we have time, we'll get to it? These are the ways that, look at the example of that positive reinforcement in a child's life. And finally, the aspect of teaching your children to be giving. When we talked about the example that when Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain became sick, and they went to Rasulullah, Sayyidah Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen go to Rasulullah and say, Ya Rasulullah, Hassanain are sick, what should we do? He said, make another that if Allah gives them shifa'ah, that you will fast for 3 days. And what happens? That alhamdulillah they get their health, and Sayyidah Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen decide we're going to fast, and Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain and Fidda who was in the house, they all agree to fast. And the first night that comes, when it's time to open their fast, a poor person comes to the door. And when that poor person comes to the door, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidah Zahra and all of the children get together and they give their food to that poor person. And they open their fast with water. The second day comes, they fast. What happens? An orphan comes to the door. And when that orphan comes to the door, what do? They give away their food to the orphan. The third day comes, they've been fasting for 3 days. And when it comes time to open their fast, a prisoner who has been freed comes to their door. What do? They give away their food. If I want to teach my children to be giving personalities, they have to see me give, and I have to teach them to give from the beginning. If I want my children to be generous people the way my Ayyam were generous people, I have to set the example in my house. I have to begin that practice from the very beginning, so that they become like these personalities, that they learn that I give away from what I have to go and build a relationship with Allah. There's examples in the old times in Najaf. What parents would do is that they would teach their children about khums. And what they would do is, if tomorrow is the date that we take out our khums, today I give my child $10. So there's a very famous story from Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim, who was the mujtahid marja of his time. He says, one day I was sitting in my office in my barani, I was sitting in my place where people come and visit me. And people were coming and going, but in the back of the hall I saw a child sitting there. So when he wouldn't come to me, I called him. I said, come, what's the matter? Why don't you come to me? He comes, he says, I'm embarrassed to talk to you about something. The Sayyid says, talk to me. I'm here, talk to me. He says, Sayyid, my father gave me some money yesterday. He gave me $10. And today is the date that we take out khums. Do I have khums that's due from this money? Sayyid says, yes. He says, Sayyid, I'm embarrassed. Sayyid says, why are you embarrassed? He says, it's such a small amount of money. I'm embarrassed to present it to you. It's such a little bit of money. The Sayyid says, no, it's your obligation. Present it. It's a good thing. So the child comes, he takes out the $2 that is the khums, and he hands it to the Sayyid. The Sayyid says, thank you very much. This child leaves, and the Sayyid says, I swear, I have never received more pure money than this money that I have received from this child. Parents used to train their children to be in the habit of taking out their khums and their financial obligations by giving them money at times that it would be mandatory that they would have to separate from the money, so that when they get older, the idea of paying zakat and khums and these financial obligations would not be something strange or difficult for them. And we have to begin the same process, that in our households we educate our children like Sayyidah Zahra did with her children, that even give away the food that you're eating for the pleasure of Allah. لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. We don't want from you any reward or any thanks. We only want the pleasure of Allah. This is how we apply these lessons to our day-to-day life and build a relationship, that this is what a successful life looks like. These are lessons of application to our lives from the personality of Sayyidah Zahra, so that we can be seen as people who loved this personality. And what a personality she was. The description's right, that they say that one morning the people, when they woke up for Fajr, they found that the entire city of Medina was lit up. Now at Fajr it's still dark out. So they looked around, they said, it's the time for Fajr, but what is this light in the city? They went to the house of Rasulullah and they said, Ya Rasulullah, what is this noor that has engulfed the city of Medina? He said, go to the house of Fatima. When they went to the house of Sayyidah Zahra, they found that she was standing in her prayer niche and she was praying. And the nur of Sayyidah Zahra as she prayed was such that it covered the entire city of Medina. They said the nur of Zahra for the angels in heaven was like a star that we see in the sky. But how did the people repay this nur of Zahra? How did they appreciate this nur of Sayyidah Zahra? That after her father left, they did not let her live for more than 90 days, no matter how you look at it. The descriptions they write in her final moment, Sayyidah Zahra said, "Oh Ali, when I leave this world, I want you to do my ghusl. I want you to do my kafan. I want you to do my salat. I want you to bury me in the middle of the night. Don't let anyone know where I was buried. I want them to stay away from me, those who have done injustice to me." And then after that, they say that Sayyidah Zahra, after Amir al-Mu'mineen left the house, she sent Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain to the masjid and stayed at home. She turned to Asma, who was in the house, and she said, "Asma, I'm going to go pray now. I'm going to go do the dhikr of Allah. When you hear my voice stop, understand that Fatima has left this world." Asma says, "For some time, I heard the hamd and thana coming from the room of Sayyidah Zahra, where she had laid herself down and covered her face, and she was remembering Allah. After some time, the voice of my mistress ended. I could no longer hear her calls to Allah. I could no longer hear her mentioning the name of Allah. In this situation, Hassan and Hussain came back inside the house. They said, "Oh Asma, we wish to see our mother, we wish to sit with her." Asma says, "Oh children, wait, why don't you eat some dinner first?" They said, "Oh Asma, have you ever seen Hassan and Hussain eat without their mother? We've never eaten a morsel of food without the company of our mother." Asma says, "But wait, your mother is resting, she is tired. Leave her be for a while." They said, "Oh Asma, we are the nur of the eyes of our mother. When she sees us, she will be rested and comforted." Asma says, "I could not keep the children from their mother. They ran into the room. I heard Hassan from one side call out, 'Mother, oh mother, I am your Hassan, answer me.' On the other side, Hussain stood. He called out, 'Mother, this is your beloved Hussain. Why don't you answer me when I call to you?' They said after some time, Hassan lifted the cloth from the face of his mother, turned to his brother and says, 'Oh brother, today we have been orphaned. My condolences to you on the passing of our mother.' These two children, not knowing what to do, they ran to the masjid. When they run to the masjid, they go to Amir al-Mu'mineen, 'Ya Abata, our mother has left this world.' The Mu'arrikhin write, they said, 'We saw Ali. He went for the door. He stood up, then he sat down. And then again he stood up, and again for a moment he walked and he sat down.' We said, 'Oh Abul Hassan, what has happened to you?' He says, 'Fatima has left this world. I don't know what to do anymore. Should I stand up? Should I sit down? How shall I continue when Fatima has left me?' They describe that this Amir al-Mu'mineen, per the rites that Sayyidah Zahra had mandated for him, he went to do the ghusl for Sayyidah Zahra. There is a very famous narration that I will, inshallah, if you have the patience, explain to you today. They say that as Amir al-Mu'mineen did the ghusl of Sayyidah Zahra per her request, what narration says? He let out a pained scream. Another narration says he left the room of ghusl, he went outside, sat on the ground and began to cry. The third narration says that Amir al-Mu'mineen put his head against the wall and began to weep. Asma, who had been in the house, she says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, you are Fatih Khaybar. You are the winner of Khandak. What happened that now I see you in this condition that you are weeping in a corner for Fatima?" He says, "Oh Asma, Fatima had some wounds that even I did not know about. Fatima suffered in ways that even I did not know. I have read in the book Hujum ala Bayti Fatima. There is a narration. It is a very heavy narration. How is it possible that Ali ibn Abi Talib did not know the wounds of Sayyidah Zahra? They say that the description of that day when the door was pushed on Zahra, there were 3 types of wounds that were inflicted on Sayyidah Zahra. One is Saqt al-Janeen, that her son Muhsin was martyred. And we know this because Sayyidah Zahra called out, Fidda, come to me, my Muhsin has been lost. The descriptions write that at that moment when Amir al-Mu'mineen was running from the house, or he was leaving the house, they said we saw Ali run from the house, and as he ran from the house, he threw his aba on Zahra and said, Fidda, help her, I can't bear to see the loss of Muhsin. So Amir al-Mu'mineen knew about Saqt al-Janeen. The second is that from the pushing of the door upon her, they said that the ribs of Zahra broke. They say that by the breaking of the ribs of Zahra, the sound was as if it was broken glass as her ribs were shattered inside of her. So Amir al-Mu'mineen heard the breaking of the ribs of Zahra. The third, they say, is remember it was a door. A door is made of wood and nails. They said when that mal'oon pushed with his foot on top of Zahra with the door, there were some nails that pierced the chest and the side of Zahra that no one knew about. Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he did the ghusl of Zahra, when he passed his hand over the body of Zahra, some of these wounds that he did not know about became apparent to him in that condition. Hi Madhluma, how evil were those people? How much did they hurt you that Ali did not even know the difficulties you were in? Amir al-Mu'mineen finished the ghusl. He did the tahneed. He did the kafan. After that, he said to his children, children, come and bid your final farewell to your mother. It is time to separate from your mother. Hassan came and he hugged his mother. Zainab came. Kulthum came. The Mu'arrikh writes that Hussain stood by the feet of his mother. And he said, when his father said, why don't you bid farewell? He says, Baba, when Maryam left, Isa said, she called to Isa, to him, I am no less than Isa. If my mother won't call to me, Hussein will not bid farewell to his mother. They said it was his saying this that the kafan opened. Sayyidah raised her hands and Hussein ran to the chest of Zahra. Hassan and Hussein hugged themselves to the chest of Zahra until Ali ibn Abi Talib came, removed them. When they said, why did you remove Hassanin? He says, Jibreel has come to me and told me, oh Abu Hassan, there is such a cry in the heavens watching the difficulties of Hassanin that the earth will shatter from this condition. If you don't remove Hassanin, the world will end. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I remove them. I ask, oh Malaika, how could you be patient then when you saw Shibr sitting on the chest of Hussein? Why did the world not end then? How were you patient when Hussein was the one who was under the sword of Shibr and he kept spinning the sword? One more statement, we finish. At night, there were 3 or 4 companions who came with Amir al-Mu'mineen to bury Sayyidah Zahra. They took Sayyidah Zahra in the middle of the night. When they reached the grave, there is a ghurbat of Ali ibn Abi Talib that not many mention. When you lower a body into the grave, it takes 2 people. One who stands above and lowers the body. The second who stands in the grave and receives the body. There were 2 personalities who were so ghareeb, so alone in history. There was no one to help them. One is Sayyid al-Sajideen in Sham with Sakina. That there was no one there with Imam Zainul Abidin. That when he wanted to lower the body of his sister into the grave, he says, I saw the hands of my father come up. Sajjad, return Sakina to me. Return my amana to me. And I imagine the conversation at that time where Imam Zainul Abidin says, Baba, we tried to protect your daughter Sakina. but they would strike her when she cried. They did such zulm on her. The second personality who in history was so gharib was Ali ibn Abi Talib with Sayyidah Zahra. There was no other mahram there. Amir al-Mu'mineen is alone with the body of Zahra. How should he lower the grave of the body of the daughter of Rasulullah to the body, except that the hands of Rasulullah, some poets write, came up and said, Ali, return my daughter to me. And again I imagine Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Ya Rasulullah, don't find fault with me. I swear I loved your daughter, but the ummah put such zulm on her. They abused her such that, forgive me, I am returning your amanah. But now her eye is wounded, her arm is bruised, her ribs are broken, her Mohsin has been shaheed. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلب. ماتم يا حسين.